Hello, and welcome to Geeks and Grounds, a weekly podcast and monthly game club where we play games and brew good conversation together. I'm your host, Jenny Wyndham.
And I'm Joel Thomas.
And we have a really fun episode for you today. I'm super excited because we haven't done one of these in a long time. We have the absolute fortune of having Tony and Abby from Black Tabby Games join us because we're going to be playing Slay the Princess, the Pristine cut this month. And so we thought, why not kick it off and have a conversation again with the developers before we hop in? Because we actually talked to them when the demo came out for Slay the Princess way back last year.
Yes, and now that I've played through the game a couple of times. I know we're about to hop into it for this month. It's like there was such a rich conversation, like things that I had never thought about that they were like, oh yeah, this is like a part of the critical path of design. And yeah, I was so excited to get to chat with these folks again.
Yeah, so before we go to that interview, we recorded it, and so that'll be sort of like a separate section, I guess, of today's podcast. We want to stop by the Pastry Case. That is our grab bag of topics and media that we are consuming, enjoying, and really just taking time with that are not our game of the month. So Joel, kick us off. Anything good that you've been hanging out with this week?
Oh, just getting into a couple, an old fave.
That's like a Michigan mom, like, oh, well.
We're going to get to some old faves and about some vampires and the Lord.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart. So I haven't watched it in a little bit, but I did rewatch the old What We Do in the Shadows movie, which it's been a couple of years and I just forgot how much I love it. Like every scene has me busting the gut, like just absolutely like the dry humor, the like situational awareness. Really enjoyed it. So definitely had to hop back into that for the Halloween season. And every spare moment of my day that I am not like working, essentially, I have the Oathbringer Sanderson audiobook on and I'm listening to it. And I am so glad that I did, because there's so much that I completely forgot happened that is like critical to the world, critical to the story. And if I had just hopped into whatever comes next, like it would have been a problem. So very much enjoying this story.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I think I just started Oathbringer yesterday and I'm like literally one chapter in and then I was too tired. But I think all the other Sanderson books, I feel like I know really well because I've tried. The tradition I have is I reread the series every time the new one comes out. So like the first book, I feel like I could recite sections of it, honestly, and then it gets more blurry the closer we get to what's currently the latest releases. So yeah, Oathbringer, I'm already just like, I don't even remember what happened. I don't remember. So I'm excited to read it. It'll be like a fresh experience.
It's incredible. And like the way this dude ties these themes and characters together is just astounding to me. And the depth of how like the characters are representative of like their orders and that their orders are representative of them as people. Like, I don't know, like that exchange has been really fascinating to like dive back into. And this book really gets into that in some real ways, profound ways. So enjoying that.
I'm super excited. Very cool.
What have you been getting into?
So I have another book. I'm reading two concurrently. I just started Oathbringer. I also just started Character Limit, How Elon Musk Destroyed Twitter. Typically, honestly, the cover is like a bit of a jump scare, and I got the hardback and I took off the cover because it has his face on it. And I'm like, I don't want to look at it.
No,
like it's just
never
too far. But I am currently reading it, and honestly, I feel like my jaw drops every couple of paragraphs, if not more frequently, because it's absolutely wild. Like, I feel like we all lived through it, especially if you're permanently online like me. You saw this happen in real time, but to read an account and to get more of the context and behind the scenes is just like, wow. So yeah, that's been an interesting read. Normally I wouldn't have picked it up, but I've had so many friends recommend it to me, and so far I've really enjoyed it. It's a very fast-paced read. So yeah, so far so good. I have also been, it's October, we're in the week of Halloween, so I've just been consuming as much like horror material as possible. I think like you, it's the time.
Yes.
I after we talked about Haunting of Hill House last week, I was like, all right, let's go back through the Mike Flanagan
Okay.
Cinemaverse.
Uh-huh.
And so Sam and I watched Midnight Mass because I was like, this is the one I couldn't get through. Last time I got into like the first episode, and it was just, I think it just was not hitting because I was like, I had already watched a bunch of Mike Flanagan, and it was like, okay, it feels very similar. With, again, I think monologues are his weakness. I think he should tone that down just a little bit.
Just a hair, just 10% less,
just
Mike.
10% less monologue, and I think honestly these stories would be so much stronger.
I totally agree.
People don't talk to each other like that. Like, come on. But I will say, Midnight Mass, really good. I was like, dang, once you get into the story and you start seeing the interplay of small town life, religion, and the ways that it impacts the people, having lived in a village very much like the one in Midnight Mass, a lot of it hit home very closely. So yeah, really good.
That's so cool. I'm glad to hear that, because like I've always wondered, like, if you don't have a lot of religious trauma, if Midnight Mass is a show that like you just even can connect to. So it sounds like once you guys got to a certain point, at least you're able to like really, really engage with it.
Yeah, I think, and this time around, like I didn't feel any of the like sticking points that I think the first time. And again, I think it's because last time I tried watching it, it was because I had binged so much of his shows that like by the third or fourth Mike Flanagan joint, it's like, okay, they start to blur together a little bit. So I think I was just fatigued at that point. But yeah, it was really good. They're the main sort of, I would say, antagonist, Bev, the lady who's sort of the like the church lady.
Literally, I know 500 Bevs in my life.
Oh my God. There was one person in particular. I was like, I know exactly who this was in the village I lived in. And I just absolutely detested her. And I see this is her. And they got the character so right.
Yes.
Like, what?
She grounds the whole series for me.
Yeah.
Like that whole miniseries. I
100%.
Ugh. I will say I still have the same criticism of that series that I had the first time I saw it, which is I just needed a title card at the beginning of the first episode that says, you are about to be in a world where no one has ever heard of a vampire. And if that had been the title card, I would have been like, I'm in. This is totally believable. Like, this is exactly how the town would engage. But instead, they don't. And I'm just like, y'all didn't see Twilight? Y'all didn't watch Supernatural? Like, what
Apparently
are we?
Not. Cable
I know you're on a small island, but like, no Anne Rice. Like, what is going on here? Like, it's the one thing that is just like, that is where I have to try so hard to suspend my disbelief. For that one decision.
Yes, I would wholeheartedly agree. I think if you can just kind of ignore that, just don't pay attention to that. It's great. So,
just so that we are telling you, they are in a world where no one knows what vampires are. They don't exist.
Yeah, they don't exist. I know. I'm just like, come on. Okay. But yeah, so that was a really fun rewatch. Part of me is like, you know what? We're almost to Halloween. I think maybe I press pause because I don't want to like Mike Flanagan myself out again, you know? Because part of me was, because Sam's never seen any of them. So that's why it's also been fun to rewatch the last two. I think I kind of wanted to skip Bly Manor because it's another haunted house one. So I'm just like, it's the same as Hill House. Maybe we watch Fall of the House of Usher because that's got like a little bit more.
It's pretty different
to it.
Yeah.
But we may not, because also we may rewatch actually the Guillermo del Toro Cabinet of Curiosities. Y'all, if you have not seen that, that is like one of my favorite little anthologies. And there are some highlights in that. Like, I think the final one, the Murmuring, save that to be last, because I personally think it's one of the strongest, or the strongest. But the Murmuring, I think about regularly because it was such a good ghost story. It was, but the whole
I
thing is
never
great.
watched that one. I am just realizing, like, I remember I was like, oh yeah, I'll watch the next one tomorrow. And I am now remembering a full year later, you never went back and watched the last episode. So I've got to get into it.
Genuinely. And it's like not even a full movie. These are short, these are
Yeah.
episodic, little short story vignette sort of situations. The Murmuring was my favorite. I think about it regularly, but the whole thing is good. So if you all want something to watch on Halloween, that's a great like bite-sized option. You can pick and choose the type of horror because it's also a very wide range of horror that's represented. So you can just skip if you find one that's not to your liking. The next one probably will be more so. And yeah, I played the game Mouthwashing. Short. It's like 3 hours long, I think. Heavy content warnings. Oh my gosh. I thought I was prepared and I was like, no, this game actually is like, it is gory, it is gross. There's like anything you can think. It's all there. So definitely take those warnings seriously on the Steam page. But I still think it was worth playing. I won't get too far into it. I will like small plug the Indie Council, the other podcast I'm on. We're going to do a spoiler cast for it. So if anyone's interested, definitely check that out. But yeah, really, really good. Just, oh my gosh, I was not expecting it to be as dark as it was. So yeah.
I fully thought that this was going to be like a power washing simulator type game with a name like mouthwashing. And I was like, oh, and here's where you
No.
spray off the cavity, and that's where the tartar buildup goes. And that sounds like that's not the vibe, though.
No, it is. So you are trapped on a ship. You're a part of a very small crew. And basically, this game is about what happens to the crew on this ship. Surely nothing bad. No, you know everything bad is going to happen to them. So, yeah, it gets surreal and nightmarish, and it's really good horror, is what I can say.
Okay.
But yeah. To wind down the pastry case, some notable releases for this week. We have Fruit Bus and Life is Strange Double Exposure. Double Exposure was weird because I was like, I thought that came out 2 weeks ago, but that was just the like pre-sale. So people who did the pre-order and like press and influencers, they got copies and could play through like the first part of the game. But I think now it's publicly available. So if you were like me and a little confused, that's what it is. As always, feel free to go to geeksandgrounds.com, subscribe to the newsletter where all of the links to this to the pastry case stuff will be in there. Notable releases, all of that. Sign up for the newsletter and you will get that in your inboxes every week. So this week's brew. God, where do we even start? The conversation was so good. I guess start with an intro. We talked with Abby and Tony of Black Tabby Games. These two are the owners, the founders, the writers, designers, programmers, artists. They do everything.
They do it
Black
all.
Tabby Games. They do it all. You may know them from Scarlet Hollow, which was their first game, which is still being developed. It's an episodic visual novel with lots and lots of choices. And what we're going to talk about today, though, is their latest work, Slay the Princess, and most noticeably, the Pristine cut. So this is like the definitive edition of Slay the Princess. 35% more content, I think is what Tony said at one point, or maybe I read it on a marketing thing.
Absolutely wild. And like, we're going to talk about the runs themselves. We're going to talk about the ending. So definitely go in expecting spoilers for the conversation. But this is a game that we're really excited to be playing for this month, for November. And to dive in, we were kind of talking a bit about how we might think about playing a game that is, structured in such a way where you're making choices and branching out to different conclusions. And I'm kind of vibing with this idea of how, like, maybe in my journal, I'll write down like I'm going to play with this idea in mind and try and follow that through. So I think that's what I'm going to try and follow up with for this first week of play and see how that goes.
Nice. Yeah, I think the conversation around the game was super fun. And while we did talk like names of princesses and like I would say it's like light spoiler, we actually didn't get into super detail. So I think if you know the premise of the game, perhaps you played the demo, I would say you could probably go in and we won't say anything that
won't ruin anything.
Will ruin it for you. If you have never played the game, you have no idea what the premise is, I would say maybe go and explore the game first and then come back. But so here we are, Tony and Abby. There was slight camera issues, so I'm going to try, for folks who are watching the video, make that edit smooth visually, but just letting you know, there might be a little weirdness with the camera, but it does not change the content of the conversation, which was awesome. It is so good to have you both back, feeling surely refreshed and exuberant and excited with all of the stuff you've had going on for our audio listeners. Yeah, the faces saying it all. How are you both doing?
Pretty good, all things considered. Good. Yeah, it helps that we had so much of the work done in advance of this. Like, it's not like Tony hasn't been working, but at least we weren't crunching, so...
For those only listening, I sure have a 1,000-yard stare going on here. I've been fixing a lot of bugs. Consoles are wildly complicated, it turns out. I prefer PC.
I know. They just, oh my gosh, going through that process, the tiniest things will come back. It's just wild. I'm doing that right now with Spirit Swap, and whew.
Those like 2 business week turnarounds on responses sure do throw a wrench in plans.
They do. Oh my gosh. Well, hopefully at least on the other side right now, you're getting the chance to, even though you're dealing with a lot of business and logistics, enjoy people responding to the Pristine cut, seeing what people are gravitating towards. And today we just wanted to talk to you not just about the Pristine cut, but about Slay the Princess as a whole. You've been here with us before, and so it's really cool is we got to talk to you already about horror and about your demo, so I'm excited to get a little bit deeper with y'all.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so happy to be back.
So with Pristine Cut just out, I know it's early, but I'm curious if you've gotten any surprise things your community has really gravitated towards or resonated with, especially now that they're hopping back into the game in a lot of cases.
So they've resonated with all the right things, which is good.
We had very high expectations, I think, and our expectations have been met. So that's really nice. And just people really enjoying everything that we've made. So
yeah, and I think it's like a lot of the reception has been closely aligned with our expectations, in part because this was an expansion of a pre-existing thing. We had a very strong sense of like what parts of that original game people connected with, and we also had a strong sense of what were the gaps we wanted to fill with this. I would say there is like the one surprising thing is, so we've been doing these polls where people rank the various characters of the game in terms of preference, and I'm always taken aback by like when a character makes an interesting choice that like makes them, I guess, a little like less likable as a potential friend.
When they have a flaw.
When they have a flaw, people don't like flawed characters as much as unflawed characters in their eyes.
There have been some very interesting discussions. And of course, for me, I love when characters are just like deeply flawed and constantly like tripping over themselves because they just can't get their stuff together. Like a Saul Goodman, if you will, of just like, oh, buddy, your life would be okay if you could simply get over yourself and make better choices. But it's more interesting for them not to make those good choices and for like the worst parts of their characters to be explored. So I really appreciate that. Not everybody does. So
can you imagine a Better Call Saul where he just gets an associate's job at HH&M and then everything goes well?
Oh my gosh, the most boring show ever.
After.
I read I saw Holly Black speak one time, and she was talking about one of her protagonists that she had written, that basically she was like, I intentionally made her to make the wrong choice every single time in the hopes that this would like lead to an interesting plot. And it's like, now, you know, like a really interesting character, really interesting story. I'm wondering, like, do you think it's because it's like like in TV shows or movies, you're not always an active participant, right? You're like,
I think that's exactly it with
because
games.
the exact things that we have been hearing is basically like anyone who like doesn't vibe with some of it is like, I wish I had had the choice to make it turn out okay. And it's like, oh, you don't always get that choice.
I wish I could have just yelled some sense into this character.
Yeah.
Or
And the lowest ranked princesses are the ones where you have kind of made such choices that there aren't many choices left for you to make, because she has learned that you are an antagonist and that she has to defeat you or make you do what she wants. So
yeah.
the more forceful, like more kind of demanding, more kind of cutting you off at the pass princesses who have like decided who you are in their minds, those are the ones that people don't like.
Yeah, they don't like facing the consequences of their own actions.
They want to be able to say, can't we just let bygones be bygones for every single princess? And sometimes that's not going to work. Sometimes you've killed her like 3 times and she's pretty mad.
I love that so much, because it is sometimes personally challenging when you go through a game that ostensibly allows you a lot of agency and a lot of choice and exploration. You really feel like you can do what you want to do as a player, and then to run into those moments where you're like, oh, I'm being faced with something a bit more real and uncomfortable here. And I think that's really cool. Did you have to, like, did you intentionally go into every princess thread and type of like every scenario and think, okay, we want to create like certain stumbling blocks here? Or did you let it happen more organically? Like, how do you create those moments for players?
It was a natural exploration
Yeah.
every single time. Like, I think one of the things that led to us deciding to make the Pristine cut was there were a few places where the natural exploration ended prematurely, either because the vision that we originally had for the game like developed differently down the line, or just like we wanted to move on to something else. We felt like we explored the idea and that was that.
Because we had a time limit, so we had to make sure we put as much work as we could into it, and we were like, if there is a path here, we aren't figuring it out yet. So that wasn't us saying, no, oh, we'll definitely just do it DLC. We never planned to do DLC until about like a couple weeks after, when we did an AMA and people asked about it. And then at the end of the AMA, we just turned to each other and we're like, well, what if we did? I know we just told all these people we weren't doing it. What if we did do it? So here we are a year later.
Yeah, so it's like a couple of the expanded routes immediately come to mind, where it's like the Fury was originally the consequences of your actions are she has become much more powerful than you, and there's nothing you can do about that, and that's the end.
And she's mad at you.
And like likewise for the Apotheosis, the consequences were you willed her into divinity, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's over. And then we had some time away and we're like, okay, but like we can explore those threads some more. We can be like, okay, yeah, the Fury molecularly unwinds you.
And then
what is that? What happens next?
Yeah, what happens if you don't die? What happens if it keeps going? Because she doesn't want you to die. She wants to torment you for what you've done. And then I think it makes the princesses who are still a little bit more kind of direct in their path kind of stand out like the way that we wanted them to feel, of just like you're locked into what you have done. Your choices have led you to this point, and she will not let you deviate anymore. So
this is so fascinating. Like this whole discussion of it's the reason that these players maybe aren't jiving with that is because it's the consequence of their choices, is so fascinating, because I feel like even when I played through Slay the Princess last time, I was like, oh no, it's the characters that are making these choices. But now that you framed it like this, I will never be able to look at this game the same way again. It's like, no, this is the consequence of your choice the player.
Oh, there goes the
Mhm.
camera again.
That's okay. I'll
Should
send
we
you a
just-
picture.
Yeah, we'll just
It's okay.
Yeah.
I
do
don't need to
a
be on camera now.
PNG thing.
We'll put in the 2D version of you. A quick note for our audio listeners. At this point, the camera had cut out because of a platform error. So we kept the conversation going, but if you're watching via video, you'll see I took it upon myself to draw a little something. And so I hope you and Black Tabby Games enjoys. What I think is really interesting is that each princess has their own, like, there's the scope of the entire game, which I think really grapples with this idea of transformation and agency as players. And then each princess has her own theme that really distinctly allows players to explore different facets of that character and themselves that they play. So like the tower, I think lots goes into submission and like you're saying, losing the sense of agency. I'm curious with each princess, did you go in with certain elements that you wanted to explore and you're like, these are themes that we want to address with these princesses? Or did you just sort of say, we have these princess designs that Abby has created, let's explore what each of these says, I'm really curious
There's
because
actually a third thing.
what's the third
Which
thing?
was when we first wrote the game. The demo was the first thing that happened. Something that we've started talking about recently is the idea of a demo is essentially concept art for a game, where somebody gets an early preview and parts of it might develop into things that make it into the full version of a story or a product, but then other things, they get it, they're there as an interesting idea. You explore them more in the writing process and they don't pan out, so you cut them. But for us, we kind of built the demo around this chapter 1 scenario in the game, which is the main framework for it. You're on a path in the woods. There's a cabin, there's a princess, there's a knife. What do you do with this combination of things? And then from there, we kind of look at those actions and we look at the relationship that comes from those choices. And then we ask ourselves, like, well, what is this relationship?
Yeah.
And how is it different than that relationship? So, like, an actually very interesting thing with this is when we did the first demo, I guess 2 years ago, little less than that. But when we did the first demo, like, if you went down with a knife and you fought the princess, it didn't matter if you, like, mutually killed each other or if she just, like, completely crushed you, or if when you attacked her, you imagined that she had a weapon, so she had one. That demo all had them lead to the same chapter 2, which was called The Fury. And we went to expanding the game. We realized that, like, all the ways you could get there were so broad that there weren't themes to explore with that character. There wasn't a solid relationship, which is why when we did the second demo in, I think it was March of last year, that's when we went from, like, there being 6 chapter 2s to 10. So then that Fury became, if you mutually kill each other, the adversary, who's like, your romantic rival almost. The tower, if you are completely, I'll just use the word dominated. And then if that third scenario where you imagine her to have a weapon, like, she becomes the razor there, which that then became ultimately it was originally planned to be a route about fear, but we already had that with the nightmare. So in the full version of the game, that became a route about unfairness.
Yeah. So a lot of it just kind of, like, evolved very naturally, as you can see over time, because we definitely wanted also to make sure people felt the choices they were making were directly leading to what was going on and what their relationship was. So then having a princess who's just all 3 of those basically at once, it doesn't feel like you did that. It feels like it just happened randomly. So any point where it felt like it was just kind of something happened and no one really knows why, we had to make sure that we figured it out such that there was a princess for that scenario.
And you actually can see that struggle represented in like two key parts of the game, which are the stranger route and then just kind of the climax with the shifting mound, with this concept of like both of them essentially become every possible permutation of themselves, at which point, like in the stranger's case, there's initially nothing there that you can really talk to. It's like talking to a wall. And in the shifting mounds case, there's nothing that you can really reason with. She's seen literally everything, unlike you, so she's like very ironically firm in her ways. This other really interesting split that was super helpful in terms of just a thematic layout was in chapter 1, depending on whether or not you take the knife into the basement, right? There's like two different versions of the princess. There's, if you take the knife down, she's like got more of an edge to her voice. She's more combative, as someone who is threatened with a knife might be. The knife also, like the act of picking up the knife is also an acknowledgement from the player that like
they don't
there is a
necessarily
danger
trust.
here. There's no trust. And then she's like more soft and typically damsel-like if you go down without a knife. But then in both of those scenarios, you have like you have a similar subset of outcomes that each lean to their own separate chapter 2s, which means that we have this interesting thematic mirroring thing where it's like, well, these two relationships share a piece. A big one to point to there is like the prisoner versus the damsel, where in both instances you decide to try and rescue her. But another piece of that first encounter is very different. So how does that change the relationship, and how does that change the theme of the route?
At what point do you say? At what point do you say when? I guess.
This point.
So for the original game, it was actually pretty easy, where we just had what felt like within the rules of the game world that we'd established. Here's all the outcomes for the scenario. Right? There's a limited number of like tools and possibilities, which means that we were able to expansively explore every corner of that chapter 1 scenario without it being too overwhelming. Where it gets really out of hand is that second layer of branching, where you can move from a chapter 2 princess to a chapter 3 princess, and that's probably something we could find a million ways to do forever, but this is the stopping point because we'd like to work on other things now.
I've drawn enough princesses. I've drawn enough.
Drawn enough princesses. It's
as
fascinating.
fun as it is to design them, I'll say that. But.
Oh, I believe it. I even the way we're talking about this now feels like such an evolution from the conversation we had the last time we spoke. Because I don't think at that time, I don't think I had separated the route from the outcome. And it felt like the logic tree that I'm taking is going to get me to an outcome, and that's what I care about. But hearing you guys describe that, like, no, it's actually like the route itself has its own implicit themes and experiences, is such like an evolution for my own thinking. And like, I've finished the game, like I've played it, like but I didn't pick up on, I didn't notice that was like, I don't know, journey before destination, like the route itself.
Yeah, like the events that unfold are so much more. I think this happens a lot where like people tend to think that things in between are just filler to get to an end point. Like not necessarily that that's what you were saying, but that kind of, it's easy to think, well, I would like to get this thing that I desire, and I will just keep clicking buttons until I get there. And then I think some people, you know, it can lead to frustration occasionally when then the game is like, well, you should have maybe paid more attention to when you were clicking buttons because maybe you were not destined for this thing you wanted.
And I think people get caught on the edges of endings in general, and that's a major theme for the overarching narrative in the game. But like, right, they fixate on the outcome instead of how they get there, and then generally, if you're fixating on an outcome, you have a very hard time letting that go.
Oh, and I also want to make sure that people know, most people like they really get that and they really enjoy it. So
Yeah.
it's just, of course, we like to see where the friction points are to kind of see, did we do an effective job? Is this what we set out to do? So it's important to kind of take in that feedback and to understand. Because I mean, that was also a big part of the Pristine cut. Like there are a few areas where we were like, it doesn't really make sense for you to get this princess from this action. So we need a new princess for this.
Mhm.
So we have done that in a couple of places in a very satisfying way, I would say.
That's
Humbly.
very cool. Like I did like a brute force run my very first time. Like I asked no follow-up questions. I explored zero narrative. I was like, I'm being trolley problemed and I'm going to run over a person laying on some tracks. And just like I think it was like a 15-minute run or something. But
did you get the good ending?
yes.
Well, good job. You're the narrator's special little guy.
Yeah, exactly. But like it was almost one of those things where it was like, congratulations, you got exactly what you asked for. And it's like, but I'm not satisfied. And like you just explained, like the way you get to satisfaction is by like evaluating and thinking and asking the question. Like it's such a beautiful point. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Like, God, I'm never happier with a piece of work that I am doing than when I am working on it and it's coming together. And then at the end, I look at it and I'm like, well, I did it. Time for the next one.
Mhm.
Feeling personally attacked about my to-do list and how much I like to check things off of it, but we'll put that on the side.
But then once it's
Yeah.
done, do you frame the to-do list? No, you're like, well, time for the next one.
Mhm.
Yeah. And like dissatisfaction, I feel, is such an interesting friction point with narrative design, because this is something that we see every now and then where somebody will like hit a point and, like, for instance, they download the game, they follow the instructions, they get to the good ending, and then are like,
why did the game tell me to do this?
yeah, I'm unsatisfied, uninstall, refund.
It's very rare. Most people are like,
Yeah.
wow, I love the reviews on Steam that are like 5 minutes played. Wow, good game.
Yeah.
Got the good ending in one go.
But it's like, and this is a very rare thing.
Sure.
But I feel like analyzing those friction points are interesting. It's interesting to look at, well, what are the few people that like don't click with or connect with something, and why is that? Because like ultimately at the end of the day, I want to say like art is about communicating, and if you're communicating, like your audience is implicitly a part of that. So like as an artist, you have to think about that.
Yeah, so even the people who aren't connecting with it, you're still having a conversation, but it's not going the way that you intended to. And that is very interesting. Of just like, where are we not connecting here?
Yeah. So
it's fascinating.
Sometimes there's little design things you can do to kind of change that perception and remove that friction. For instance, something I've always found while working on things is like, if I see a common frustration with like a character that we've written, sometimes just like providing an outlet to voice that emotion in a game like helps people understand like, oh, it's I disagree with this character, not I'm mad at the authors.
Yeah, even just giving them the option, and they often don't even click it, but just seeing that it's there is enough for them to say, I see, okay, this is a character choice, not the narrative telling me how to feel about this character. So
yeah. But then ultimately, and this is an interesting thing with games too, especially branching narratives, is like there is a point where, you know, someone gets to a conclusion and then maybe they're a little dissatisfied, and it's like, all right, well, are you going to examine the fact that you're dissatisfied and look for satisfaction deeper, or are you going to just kind of sit there? You know, like for the former, we watched Markiplier's playthrough of the game earlier this year, which was so great.
That was so amazing.
That was
so
but
cool.
it's like,
and he would have gotten so much stuff from the Pristine
like every
cut.
single route he did would have had like one of the new Pristine cut things, and it was a little frustrating and like a Walter White stuck in the car being like, no, if you just wait 3 months.
But I am still like over the moon, and it was
Yeah.
amazing, and he loved it. So,
But it's
oh,
like
man,
he got
it's great.
to like the end game, the final decision, and there's a really funny moment where it's like he gives this whole speech about the themes of the game and then picks the one option, slaying the princess at the end, that like goes against what he was saying. But then he was like, that wasn't satisfying. There's got to be like an actual answer here. He reloaded and then he found like the outcome that jived with him, and then he was satisfied. And it's like, especially with endings in a game like this, there's this delicate dance you have to do where it's like, one, all of your endings provide texture to other endings. Right? Like sometimes a choice has value just because you're never going to pick the other option, but the other option was there. But then it's like, for each of those endings, if you're doing a good job, at least for some number of players, that'll be the best ending, right? So it's this dance of like helping. It's like painting this landscape where it's like everyone can find their own satisfaction in it, but then they also know to keep looking for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, one of the things that really, I got to attend your PAX talk at PAX West, and I think one of the things that really stuck with me was when you and Abby discussed how when choosing a branch, players, I forget exactly how you phrased it, so feel free to correct me, but players should not feel they're getting less information or feeling cut off from
Yeah.
like that context or knowledge of the game. And so I think that after hearing you talk about that and how these branches should not make players feel like they have less than, playing Slay the Princess is even more illuminating to me now. I feel like knowing that context.
Thank you for coming to the talk, by the way.
Yeah, it was so good.
Yeah, I feel that basically this is a big reason why people, like, you know, they'll save scum, they'll reload, they'll say there must be a correct option. Like, making sure that it doesn't feel like there is a correct option, and that the path you are on is the path you are on, is like, I think the biggest part of making choice-based narratives work.
Yeah, and it's so hard because like you have to structure everything around that framework. And like something that really works for us is we are a 2-person team and we are making visual novels, which are like narrative only. So we can let that structure reign supreme. But it gets like so much harder when you're looking at larger scope things.
Yeah, if you have to do like intense character animation and voice lines and everything every time you want to have a decision happen at all, I mean, that's money, it's time, it's so much labor.
Yeah, and there's also the thing in these games where it's like there's so many points in the narrative where like something could wildly branch off. Like one of the things that is like both understandable and a frustration to me is the way so many choice-driven games handle character death, where it's like kind of one of two things will happen. One, it's like a character dies in an almost mechanical sense, and then the game world barely acknowledges that, and you just kind of go on about your day. And another is like the, you know, and more like very choice driven stuff. Well, this character could die at this point in the game. We'll just have them like leave the story 5 minutes later if they survive, so it's like it doesn't have this cascading impact on things. And it's like,
and I understand it's hard to make sure that you then incorporate that character into the rest of the story without it getting wildly out of control, especially if you want to then have different character deaths along the road. Like, that is infinite branches, but you could also just do it, which is what we're trying to do. So
yeah, well, that's the one, like, speaking of dissatisfaction, as a, you know, if you're playing the games and you feel like at the end they drop the ball like that, that is like one of my personal biggest dissatisfactions, when I'm so invested in that world and I feel like up until that point, you know, things have felt really like they've made sense to me as a player, and then at the end it's like, oh, never mind, I feel the game now.
Yeah, the instant that the game starts to feel like a game, that's it's tough. And
it's
then,
interesting.
I'm sorry.
It makes me think of like how much time and money and effort and staff went into a game like Baldur's Gate, where it's like, you know, seemingly infinite choices and character deaths and all this stuff. And yet you might not recognize any of the themes or motifs that are running to inform that experience. And like playing a game like yours, where it's like, there's still way more choices and ways that you can move through this game than I can like mentally hold in my head. And yet I can see that intentionality in those runs. I don't know, like there's something really special about that. And like that you guys are able to facilitate that type of introspective playthrough is really incredible.
Thank you. That is so nice.
That's why writers should be creative leads on all video games.
Yeah.
You heard
What
it here
themes are we
first.
talking about here with this video game?
How
That's
does
the
it
big
all
question.
tie together?
Yeah, how does this person's side story tie into our greater themes, guys?
Mhm,
This is
mhm.
important.
Yes. One thing we haven't talked about that I think is the element of the game that I personally think about the most and I really love, and I'm just really curious to hear your thoughts on, as much as you're able to share, is the idea that this is a game about love. And I think a lot about how this game is about in the act of not even just like romantic love, but platonic love, familial love, whereas you are knowing other people and loving them, interacting with them, and changing them as you do so, because of that push pull as a player, where you are changing the princess as you are interacting with her.
And she's also changing you.
And she's changing you as you are playing as well. I'm just curious, did you, I don't know, that is so powerful to me, and I'm just really curious how you went about thinking through that, and if you have any thoughts you'd like to add in terms of that concept of love, or the ways we transform one another simply by like talking and interacting and processing things together.
Yeah, I mean that was like one of the central ideas that got the whole game started. Right? Like the initial whole pitch was, what if the princess character was this monster who was imprisoned because she changes based on what others believe her to be?
And it's like inevitable then at some point that it's going to spiral out of control and she will become so powerful that she ends the universe. That's the thought.
But like I think that initial idea like comes, it's hard to know where any initial idea comes from, but
Right.
like I think it comes from just the fact that that's a fictional exaggeration of what all of our relationships are like, right? Like I think back to times I've lived in other cities and had different friend groups, and you know, I loved all those times and those people, but it's like when you're somewhere for long enough, it's like the relationships you've built with them and the habits you've fallen into like kind of create this cage that defines your personality, at least in how you perform it.
And other people will happily keep putting you back in this role,
Right.
because that's who they are to you. And it's not like it's a terrible thing. I mean, like I have friends that I've had since university, and we've all grown together and kind of continued to mature. And we're not the insane people we were back then, but we still like hold on to those memories. It's just, we all knew we were like that back then. And then
Yeah.
of course there's also the harder side of it, of just like I know a lot of like kind of my connection with the themes of this is how other people perceive me. Like, of course, I'm constantly worried about it, and just like conflicts that I've had with people where it's like I felt like I was such a different person in their mind that they couldn't possibly have a normal conversation with me. Like, it always had to escalate. It always had to just like become this thing where we couldn't talk to each other. So, just like seeing that and knowing that the me that lives in their head is like this horrible person, I'm just like, that's not me. Like, you never got to know me. You decided who I was. And then it just kind of escalated to a point where I had no control over it anymore. And he had no control over it anymore. And it's just like that kind of thing happens all the time, of just like, you can only see a version of someone, like a sliver of who they actually are, because the person inside of them is like unknowable to you. You only ever see a facet at any given time. And it's led entirely by conversations and actions that you might not even understand are influencing that.
And I feel like the themes of love emerged in the writing process when I was working on like the first conversation with the shifting mound, when you finish your first route and you meet her in the long quiet, and just kind of like sort of writing this ethereal being where kind like the constraints of the life you just shared were stripped away from her, and you're kind of seeing each other through that for the first time, and just being like, well, what should this be? And what felt right in that scene is like, beyond everything else, like the core facet of her personality is she loves you no matter what. And if that's like the core of the relationship, then how do we take that thread, bring it back, and weave it through all the roots?
It's so powerful, and I think especially I think about capacity for change, and at least one of the ways that I consider this game as you go back each time is this idea of like, well, in this way we interacted and this is what happened, but maybe next time I'm going to go into this next interaction with a different benefit of the doubt or a different intention, and hope that maybe our interaction will change as a result. And especially, I don't know, with everything, we're, as of this recording, a week out from the election, and so I'm thinking a lot about how are we interacting with one another as people, and what are the ways that we're like influencing each other and like setting each other up for success or for failure or for conflict. And so like playing this game, I think, has been especially poignant at this point in time for me.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or
difficult.
It's
Is
both
what
at
it
the
is.
same
Hope,
time.
you know? Yeah.
There's something really interesting about like that intentionality where it's like, I think on my next run through, I'm going to do this thing differently. But then you have this new voice in your head and it's like, well,
Yeah.
hold on. Maybe it is just, I think you've almost butterfly affected us where it's like,
Yep.
You thought this was the path you were going down, but you butterfly affected. And now there's this other thing that you have to consider that like, oh man, I not even thought of that before.
And of course, we lock you out of doing the same second chapter twice in a playthrough, which throws a wrench into that.
Yeah, and I do feel the voices also in particular are added to make sure the player keeps a piece of who they were in the previous chapter, to be like, don't forget you were the person who made this choice. This is the part of you that is now a little bit more vocal, and it can kind of guide your actions. So, and cut you off of certain options because, oops, no, now you have this little guy in your head who's like, no, you should always take the knife. I mean, it's just smart to do that. So.
Something I find really interesting watching other people play is getting a sense for like the meta progression of their overarching narrative, where at least with streamers I tend to see a pretty common trend of like their first run through, they either just like react very organically and something happens, or they decide to be contrarians on stream, which I guess is acting organically. They get stranger. And then it's like they have one or two run throughs where it's like they
have an intention.
Yeah, they're trying to puzzle box it, which is like interesting. It's sometimes frustrating in the moment for us as developers, because one of the things that we are constantly trying to push against is this idea of interactive narratives being puzzle boxes of make the right choices, learn the rules, get the right ending.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we don't have right endings. It's
why we put an exhausting amount of time into balancing the major decisions in all of our games so that everything feels fleshed out, everything feels right. Generally, we do this like in Scarlet Hollow or other game by setting up like a worst of both worlds scenario, so there is no true good outcome. But anyways,
Yeah,
they'll puzzle
exactly.
box
We give
it.
you a lot of consequences instead of being like, here's what you gain. We're like, here's what you lose, and we make it equal on both sides.
Generally, their second run when they start puzzle boxing is they get the Spectre. It's what if I just follow instructions really hard, kill, and then they continue to keep that up in the Spectre chapter,
until
and it
they
goes
get
poorly.
the Wraith.
And then they regret that and realize like maybe I shouldn't puzzle box that hard. And generally by like the last one or two princesses they're collecting in that playthrough, like they're back to engaging very organically and like not maybe looking for right answers so much as trying to build a non-shitty relationship.
Yeah, they start to see her as an actual character instead of a problem to solve. Because I think a lot of people here slay the princess and they're like, okay, the princess is the problem. How will I solve the problem? I won't say that it is a problem. I will run away from the problem. I'll do what he says and solve the problem the way he told me to. It's like those are like the three most popular.
And so something that I think is also really interesting in that framework is the way we pressure players into slaying the princess is by telling them the entire world will end if they don't do it.
And then,
which of course is just a metaphor for like being afraid of things changing.
And then you don't know the world. It's a very purposeful choice of just like, what world? I think you can even ask the narrator kind of questions. You're like, well, are there people?
But also the very interesting thing is usually towards the end of the story, it's like people have moved beyond that trolley problem perspective on things. And it's like those consequences are treated as non-existent, which means they get a little more courageous and inquisitive in their actions.
They're seeing her as the only other person that they know. Like, they know the narrator, he's in their head, but
yeah, he sucks though.
Yeah, it's very much like the stranger has a line at the end of like the stranger has a line at the end if you get her in the final cabin of like, you're the only thing that can see me in ways I can't see myself. Like, you're the only other thing I've ever known. Of just, that's how you feel partway through the playthrough of just like, what world outside? I don't care. Me and the princess. Like, how do I make sure that me and the princess are cool and that we're chill together and I give her good forms instead of bad ones? As far, I don't think any forms are bad personally. I think they're all interesting, or else we wouldn't put them in. But some of them are sweet and nice, innocent little princess ladies, and some of them are like an evil ghost who wants to possess your body and murder you forever.
Forms that stir emotions other than fear.
Yes.
Versus forms that singularly stir fear.
Well, fear is a nice emotion. I am
for you. That's the goth.
I've heard it's the mind killer, but once he comes out.
Who needs a mind? Get that thing out of here.
It's really funny. Like, a lot of times when Jenny and I play through a game throughout a month, we end up kind of choosing different persona that we want to embody while we play. Like, when we played Citizen Sleeper, Jenny played very much with this almost like communal mindset, and I played with this very much like everyone's out to get me mindset, and like I don't trust it. Like, and that we tried to like make our decisions as that character as we played through. And I think like your game gives us an excellent opportunity to do that like several times in a way that games that are like, I don't know, different games, you maybe don't get that choice or that chance. And I don't know, I'm really excited to do that as we get into this month's game and start playing through it again. Is like, okay, this week I'm going to play this as though like I'm someone very curious about the future of this relationship. Or this week I'm going to play this as though fill in the blank. Like, I love that you guys are giving us the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, basically every restart is you move to a new city and you get a fresh start. Who am I? Am I a guy who wears turtlenecks? Perhaps so.
You gotta choose that for yourself.
Yeah.
Am I the guy who wears turtlenecks should be the title of this episode.
Oh my gosh. We are getting close to time. I wanted to ask just a few like silly rapid fire questions if you would like to answer them, but also if there are any things that you would like people to know as they hop into the Pristine cut, as they're playing it I don't know if there's any things that you hope players consider. I would love for you to have the opportunity
I
to share
hope
that right now.
only that they approach the game with an open heart.
Yes. Play with your heart.
I love that. That's so good. Okay, so my curiosity, I love snacks. I'm always curious about the snacks that get people through projects. Like I tend to fixate on a snack, and that's like the thing that I like to eat when I'm doing a thing, and I associate like memories with different foods. Did you have a favorite snack or like restaurant or order that you picked up when you were working on the Pristine cut?
Yeah, let me think. Well, for me, what pops into my head is there's this place that sells like a vegetarian dried squid, and it's a little spicy and it's chewy, and it doesn't taste anything like squid, but it's great. So, yeah, I
It
love
is
that
so
stuff.
spicy that I start coughing anytime I have a bite.
Oh, it's so good. I love it. It really wakes me up.
It's perfect.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, what was yours?
Gosh, I don't actually know.
Well, we would usually order from like there's this other vegetarian restaurant that has like a General Tso's chicken. It's really good.
That's
Yeah,
real good.
I think we're meal people is the problem.
Yeah, we're meal people.
Like this snack pops into my head because it's one of the few snacks that I eat.
That's so cool.
like I definitely, in the worst parts of a deadline, rely extremely heavily on DoorDash. So it's like the same three places on rotation. There is this really good Nicaraguan place that has like this platter that's like fried cheese, really good black beans, some nice avocado,
And garlic mashed potatoes.
garlic mashed potatoes. I was trying to remember what the last item was.
Yeah, that was a good order.
That place is good. And then there's also like this really good vegetarian fake bacon that we get for breakfast, and I guess that's embedded in my mind is the flavors of the grind.
They also they're the guys to make the squid.
Yeah,
They're
they
good.
make the squid too.
Yeah.
Yum.
Can I ask a follow-up question that is perhaps my new favorite, like, would you rather question?
Ooh.
Okay, you mentioned garlic potatoes, which is what popped this into my mind. I want you to imagine a world a mere 5 years into the future where potatoes have gone extinct for some ecological disaster reason.
Oh no.
But you have one friend that is like a professional chef that has like 6 potatoes, and they pull you to the side and they're like, I'm going to prepare your favorite potato dish. And they are an expert at that type of preparation. And you get to choose what the last potato meal you or anyone on earth will ever have is. What
like
type of
Samwise.
potato? Yeah.
Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew. This is Samwise asking you in the future.
What is the go-to? Like, what type of potato do you go for in that scenario?
There's this Japanese cafe around the corner from us that has like these exceptionally good like nori French fries.
You want those?
Yeah, I mean they're really good.
For me, I think there's like a grain chart or like a staples chart that goes around that's like which one would you kill, and potatoes is on there, and I always pick potatoes. So for me, I'm like, well, just mash them honestly with some nice gravy. But to be fair, there's also gnocchi. I'm a pasta person.
Gnocchi's really good.
Love pasta.
Oh,
and
gnocchi's a great answer.
That nice chewy. I think gnocchi's got to be the one.
I might have to rescind and go gnocchi. I forgot that I wouldn't be able to have that anymore.
Yeah, you'll have to have sweet potato gnocchi, which tastes like
sweet. Awful. I'm not a sweet potato fan.
Thank you for indulging me. Like you mentioned garlic potatoes, and like I simply must know.
Is this like a question you have in the back pocket?
I literally last night I found myself thinking about this, and I was like, are they French fries? Are they mashed potatoes? Like one potato dish for the rest of my life, one time.
Yeah.
So
what are your answers? The both of you. I want to know.
I did go mashed. I was thinking about like I very rarely order mashed potatoes, but like I'm in a very fancy restaurant and they happen to like come with the other meal that I'm interested in. It's like, wow, that person did something special here, put their foot in it, and I'm enjoying. And I thought, like, I think mashed potatoes is the thing that like gives me that feeling from a potato.
That's so interesting because it's like I like mashed potatoes, but they always feel okay to me.
I think there's also that one dish where it's like half cheese and half mashed potato. It's like this Italian thing. It's like a side dish that you just eat on its own.
Oh, that one's really good.
It's really good.
Yeah,
think
I
I've
was
only had
gonna
it once.
say, for me, it would have to be. See, unlike Abby, I am a potato person. Like, I would never kill potatoes if that was on the grid. But so I love them in all forms. I do love like a cheesy potato, like a scalloped cheesy
Oh,
scalloped potato.
Those are really
The
good.
potato gnocchi, though, I'm like, that
was a good ass
That's a
answer.
really good anser.
Gnocchi's like the best pasta.
It is.
It's
Well,
number
okay.
one.
There's a lot of
Are you
good
gonna fight me
pastas
on
out
that?
there. I actually no, I don't think I can.
It's the best one.
Yeah, I have a soft spot for angel hair because it's what we always had growing up. But
Oh, yeah, it's so good. Okay, do you have any other
Sorry, no,
follow-ups?
I just wanted to
No.
start a war in the
That was a
comments
really good
about the
one.
type of potatoes we like.
That has to be the established
Roast
question
us.
now.
like a potato, perhaps.
And I'm curious, just to close us out, if you can, and maybe even just to limit it and be like, just for today, if you had to pick your favorite princess and voice for today, not for all time, so
Damsel
that way you're not
chapter
picking your
3
favorite.
from the Pristine cut by
Mhm.
like 10 miles, number one princess. Best voice remains the opportunist, who's my special little boy.
Yeah.
He's a real piece of shit.
Oh, he's great.
Love him.
Oh man, I think for me, it's got to be Fury still. Like I acknowledge that.
Yeah, you acknowledge
Damsel
that
Chapter
Damsel
3
Chapter
is the
3
best
is the
one.
best one.
But my favorite is the Fury because I really like drawing her route. It was so much fun. She's so cool. And I'm really happy that she got to see more screen time and get some extra stuff going on. And then voice is definitely, oh no.
Just to say the broken?
I was going to say the broken, but then I was like, oh, the cold and the Fury are cool together. Like, I think that they're fun as like a couple. But then, yeah, I think the broken is still just too great. Yeah.
Mhm.
I know that a lot of people don't like him because he's really sad, but I'm like, he's so neat, for real, for real.
I love a sad boy.
And this is just your favorites for today. So, it's like not locking you into anything. So,
Thank you. Low pressure.
Yeah, low pressure.
They're all my favorite little children.
I know it's like impossible to pick. Like, whenever folks ask for like our favorite characters from our game, I'm like, I can't pick my children. Like, this is absurd. But
Yes.
No, it's Damsel 3, it's Opportunist,
But he's like,
narrator, and it's Tabitha. Done.
And it's Tabitha, yes. Oh my gosh.
Perfect.
Do you have anything you would like to share about Scarlet Hollow? I'm like, do you have anything about Scarlet Hollow you'd like to share? Or,
Yes,
I mean, we do. We don't have a date for it, but we're doing a really cool update before episode 5 comes out, where we're revisiting the early chapters and adding more branching to them because
it wasn't representative.
It wasn't
of what
representative of our
happens.
current skill level.
Exactly. It's like, it was the first thing we did, and we have now solved a problem that we have had kind of in the back of our minds since the beginning. So we have a really good solution.
We're adding Don't Go Into the Woods with Stella in episode 1 route. That's like its own thing.
Yeah, because people are like, I would like to have this option. And it's like, I would like to give you this option, but good God, the repercussions of that. How do we possibly bring you into the narrative? We figured it out.
Yeah, so we're working on that. Getting all of our pieces in place before we run through episode 5 and then run through the rest of it.
Because now, of course, we want to make sure that all of the setup is done before starting episode 5, because this is going to impact episode 5.
That is huge. Oh my gosh. I just replayed chapter 1. I think you both saw. So now I'm like, I got to replay it another time, I guess.
Yeah, no,
it'll be pretty different. So.
Also, the UI is getting a big overhaul, which is very exciting.
Yeah, because again, it was baby's first UI. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what I was doing. So this is much cuter. I think it looks much nicer.
I'm so excited. Awesome. Well,
I'm
thank you.
excited.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I just said I'm excited too.
Well, thank you so much, you both, for stopping by again. Congratulations on Pristine Cut on the next Scarlet Hollow update. I really sincerely hope you both get a lot of rest at some point before the
That'll
year
be
is
nice.
out. Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this has been so wonderful. You're both very fun to talk to. Thank you.
So that was our conversation. I hope you all enjoyed it. Again, go support Black Tabby Games. I'll put the links in the description of the podcast as well as the video, so everyone who's engaging with this can go follow them if they haven't already. For our playthrough as a community, because the game is branching, because there are so many directions it could take, we're doing this as essentially like we're playing it the whole month, but we're going to have just one spoiler cast for it. So we're going to have that out next week, but play the game throughout the month. Listen to the podcast whenever you are available and ready to listen to like the routes we got through. And we'll still have our hangout at the end of the month. November is wonky because now it's like holiday season. Folks are starting to hop in and out of places. So we're going to try and communicate everything as best we can. Currently, the hangout is scheduled for November 30th at 3 p.m. Pacific. That's where we'll do all our conversations about the game just as a community. But the podcast spoiler cast should be out on the 5th. So keep your eyes and ears out for that. If you're like already barreling through the Pristine Cut and you just want to like hear our thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us here at Geeks and Grounds.
Wait, sorry, I forgot.
Yeah.
One last housekeeping.
Please.
If you have not already yet sent your nominations in for 2025 Geeks and Grounds, we started this tradition last year. We're keeping it going because it was so much fun, and I'm already excited. Geeks and Grounds, half of the titles are curated by myself, and then the other half are curated by you, the community. We're currently nominating games until November 12th. So if you have, we're capping it at 2 because we have A, more community members, and B, lots more games being nominated. So we're like, we've got to cap it. So if you would like to nominate games, pick out 2 that you think we should play as a community, and it will get added to the ranked choice vote that we're going to have after November 12th, once all the nominations are in. And then I forget the actual date. It'll be in the newsletter, but we'll have the date for voting set already. And you'll have basically 2 weeks to put your vote in. And we'll have an episode dedicated to, I believe on the 12th is the episode dedicated to talking through all of the nominations. So that'll be kind of like the fun episode before Thanksgiving holiday. So yeah, get those nominations in. We have a bunch. Looks really good. And even if they don't get voted for, like officially picked, know that I'm still taking notes, and if a game doesn't get picked via community vote, honestly, some of these I am considering just curating and making it a part of our community selection anyways, or like my selection,
your selection.
So yeah, it's always good to know, and I'm adding to my wish list and picking up games because you all have really good taste. So that's it for housekeeping.
Incredible.
Sorry,
the house feels so squeaky clean now. I'm loving it. May all of you find the perfect turtleneck to become a turtleneck guy as you go into the world for the coming month. Bye.
Bye. The Geeks and Grounds podcast is produced and edited by me, Jenny Wyndham. The logo is designed by Lee Thomas, and the theme song for today is The Princess. This is a special edition live by Brandon Boone and played by the Czech National Symphony Orchestra, celebrating the Pristine Cut soundtrack today. In addition to finding episodes across YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, you can hang out with us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Geeks and Grounds and reach out to us with questions, comments, thoughts, or feedback via our website at geeksandgrounds.com. Thanks again for listening.